Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Elinor Johnston-Leake, the senior content producer here at the Australia Institute, and as always, I'm talking to our chief economist, Greg Jericho.
Hello, Elinor.
How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm good. Doing really well.
That's good. You seem pretty peppy considering what's happened so far this week.
Let's just say I'm probably been fired up this week.
You're ready to have a bit of a rant, I think.
I've been ranting a bit this week and let's just keep it on going.
Yeah, well, I mean, it did happen a few days ago, but I feel like we do need to talk about it. The RBA had their meeting this week and they did what you were worried they would do, but also what you were almost entirely sure they would do. They raised interest rates again to 4.35%. This effectively undoes all of the interest rate cuts that we had last year. And the press conference that Michelle Bullock does afterward is always pretty revealing. You can always get a sense of what they're thinking in that. But I feel like this one, you really got to know exactly what she was thinking. She was very clear, I think, more than she usually is in this one. It did feel a bit like as the kids say, a mask-off moment where she was just pretty clearly saying where the RBA priorities lie. And they don't really seem to be with helping struggling Australians with the cost of living. And there are a few points of the speech I think that I'd just like to go through with you.
Let's do it.
And let's just have a chat about what she has to say.
Elinor is fired up, I'm telling you. I wrote a column on The Point and Elinor...
I was reading through it just like, what did she say? All right. Well, I think the first thing that she said that I thought was pretty interesting was she said that we don't, in regards to their mandate, the RBA's mandate, we don't give equal weight to both, that is both inflation and full employment.
The narrow path was something that my predecessor talked about and it captured that idea that we had a dual mandate. But it's also true that we don't give equal weight to both, and it depends a little bit on where we think the relative risks lie.
So, Greg, that's really, as she's just saying here, as I suppose, you can kind of tell from their actions, that they're really much more focused on inflation than they are on the full employment part of their mandate.
Yeah, and as you say, it is a bit of a mask off because we'd long suspected this. And sure, she said, last year when we thought inflationary pressures were coming down, we were a bit more, when we dropped interest rates, that's when we were a bit more caring about the full employment thing. I'm like, really? Let's be honest, you're always worried more about inflation than unemployment. And the really, there's no sort of thing in the RBA's act saying, it's up to you to decide which one you weight more or anything. It's basically
these are your two things.
These are the things you got to do.
Yeah.
And they're like, we can.
But we kind of care more about that one.
Yeah. And what was really, I think, revealing was not just in terms of her saying that, but in terms of how then she went on to sort of talk about unemployment and where she was comfortable with it being.
Yeah, she said...
well, I would hope that we can continue to have an unemployment rate in the fours. But ultimately, we don't control what the full employment number is. We can't control that. We can only basically set monetary policy to keep inflation low and stable. That will hopefully mean that businesses have room to plan, not worry about inflation, makes it conducive to hire people to invest. That's what we can do to contribute it. You can't have low and full employment if you don't have low and stable inflation. They just don't go together in the long run.
I think the phrasing of we'll hope that it will continue to have it in the fours.
Yeah, and
we're going to actually act on it.
That was in response to a question by Michael Pascoe, a really long-time economics reporter who many might know, even those who sort of can remember him on the Today Show back in the 80s and everything. So really an excellent reporter. I've had a lot to do with him and he's really great. And he, right at the end of the press conference, sort of got up and said, hey, in your statement and in your research, you always sort of talk about how unemployment at the moment is low historically. And he says, hey, unemployment has been around 4% or lower for 5 years now. Why are you talking about, aren't you talking about ancient history kind of now? Isn't sort of 5 years a pretty good base to go from? Shouldn't that be where you're targeting? So he's talking 4% as sort of where they should be saying that's pretty much where we should be trying to ensure unemployment remains. And her response is, well, I'd hope to keep it in the 4s. And I'm like, hang on, 4s includes 4.7, 4.8, 4.9.
Yeah.
That's a long way from 4. And the thing that really struck me is you point out, there's no way. Could you imagine to say, oh, yeah, I'd hope to keep inflation in the 2s.
Yeah, it's a very active versus passive approach to these things.
Yeah, because the RBA, and this really gets through what we mean by that dual mandate of full employment and stable inflation, and them caring more about inflation in that Michelle Bullock, when she came in, the Reserve Bank's inflation target range was between 2 and 3%. And since she's come aboard, she said, actually, we're aiming for 2.5%. We're aiming for the midpoint. Yeah. That's where we want to be. And it's like, okay. Michael Pascoe then said, so will your forecast say unemployment's going to rise to 4.7%? Is that too high? And she's like, oh, I wouldn't say it's too high. I'm like, hey, it's this sense of how can you say you care about full employment, you care about that aspect of your dual mandate where on one side you're like, we're aiming for 2.5. And whenever it's above 2.5, we got to do something to get it down, including hitting interest rates. And on the other, well,
we'll hope that it'll stay in the 4s.
Yeah. And this all comes back to what the RBA thinks full employment is. And you might think, oh, that's a position where anyone who wants to get a job is able to get a job. And no. What they think full employment is what the unemployment rate is when inflation is consistently below 3%.
So it's still tied to inflation.
Yeah. So if, for example, they keep raising interest rates and the economy slows and everything clears up in the Strait of Hormuz and everything, and inflation's back below 3%, and at that point unemployment is 5%, well, the Reserve Bank will go, well, obviously that's where unemployment should be.
God.
So it's very,
inflation all the way down.
Yeah, so it's very easy to achieve full employment when you're saying, well, we're not actually aiming for anything. That'll just be the consequence of what happens with inflation.
Yeah.
And it's a horrendous view because you've got them caring about the fact, all this talk about inflation at the moment, no talk about unemployment other than sort of vague sort of things of, oh, we'd like to keep it down. Like we'd like to. We'd hope that we can keep it down.
Well, her phrasing was she would hope to continue to have an unemployment, not we will hope that we can.
Yeah.
It's just, outside of our actions, we hope that it'll stay that way.
Absolutely right. That it's almost like, well, that's kind of outside our control.
Yeah.
If that's what it is, well, that'd be good.
It's part of your mandate.
Yeah. Yeah. And even worse, and as we'll get to this whole decision, you think, okay, well then obviously if they're caring about inflation then more, I guess that's why they raised interest rates. But the other big jaw-dropping moment from her press conference,
as I said in the remarks, these interest rate rises are not going to do anything for inflation in the next 6 months. That's done and dusted. We know that those prices are coming through.
So what are we doing here?
Look, I seriously, I couldn't believe it. And I was talking with some other of the economist guys around the office yesterday, and I was pointing out that, when she came on board, I was like, oh, she seems to actually speak quite clearly.
Yeah, when she replaced Phil Lowe.
Yeah. Whereas Phil Lowe and before him, Glenn Stevens, were very central bankery speaking. They'd talk about, the endogenous impacts of supply when combined with the exogenous impacts from the Iran war mean that the shifting parameters of demand mean that there are some price pressures that perhaps won't be alleviated by this interest rate rise. And just like,
clear as mud.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, well, this is good. She's pretty clear. But the good thing for us, I guess,
she's being clear.
She's been very clear.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, oh, gosh, that's what you actually think. And, you might think and we've said this in the past, this is something myself, Matt Grudenoff, Richard Dennis, we've all been saying this year, and especially with the March increase, we're saying that's not going to do anything to affect oil prices. That's not going to bring down petrol prices. It's not going to bring down the thing that's driving inflation. And everyone's, oh, yeah, you lefty folk, just let the RBA knows what they're doing. She literally said it.
Yeah.
She said it out loud.
She said that it's not so much inflation that they're raising the rates for. It's more about curbing inflationary expectations. Greg, what on earth are inflationary expectations?
They are what people expect inflation will be in the next year or so. That's purely it. Now, you might think, okay, there's got to be some complex mathematics going on. And there are some where they'll look at the bond market and they'll compare the 10-year bond yield with the 6-month and things like that. But what she's talking about is household expectations.
Yeah.
And how do you measure household expectations? Well, you survey people and go, what do you reckon inflation's going to be in the next year? And if you think, hang on, people in, non-economists, just normal people who are definitely smart and decided not to become economists, do they have some special knowledge about the economy? And it's like, no, it's all based on their vibes, what they think is going to happen. And one of the dirty secrets of inflationary expectations is the biggest sort of correlation with them is petrol prices. And you think, why? Well, okay, what price do you see the most?
Yeah, that is lit up in neon every time you drive.
Every 200 meters, if you're in a city, that you see every day that you have to actually pay, that you're looking at while you're filling up paying.
Yeah, looking at it count up.
And knowing, oh, that's gone up 5 cents. Whereas, I do the shopping for us, and to be honest, I can't tell you what the price of our cereal is or the price of fruit juice is offhand. Sort of when I get there, I say, oh, yeah, I think that's on sale or something, But petrol, everyone knows, $2 a litre is expensive, $1.75, oh, it's come down. You know it at very finite levels. And so, unsurprisingly, when in March petrol prices went up 30%, people's expectations for inflation shot up because they're like, oh, hell, petrol prices going up. What were they seeing on the news? Oil prices are going up. This is going to affect everything. So everyone starts thinking, oh, inflation's going up. And that's what she's talking about when she's talking about inflationary expectations.
So why does she want to raise interest rates to curb them?
Yeah, this is where it gets really bizarre because she's admitted they're not going to affect oil prices and petrol prices. But she's saying she has to raise interest rates to lower inflationary expectation. I'm like, well, if it's not going to affect the main thing that affects inflationary expectations, what are you actually talking about? And the reality is she's actually not talking about inflationary expectations. What she's really talking about is wage expectations. And again, why economists and the Reserve Bank and everything care about inflationary expectations is because if you think that inflation's going to be 5% for the next 3 years,
you might be thinking, oh, I should ask for more money.
I should be getting a pay rise of at least 5%.
Yeah.
And the Reserve Bank and Michelle Bullock are absolutely petrified of the oldie wage price spiral.
Yep.
They think it's just around the corner.
Mythical wage price
it's coming
spiral.
because it was there in 1979 when I was doing my Bachelor of Economics, and Michelle Bullock, graduated, I think it was in like 83, 84, joined the RBA in 85. The RBA had just spent the previous sort of 5 years dealing with the wage price spiral. And so it just infects their thinking.
Yeah.
It is. We haven't had one since then. We didn't even have one when we had inflation hitting sort of 9% or whatever it did back in 22, 23, inflation didn't take off through wages, but they're constantly worried about that. If unemployment is too tight or labour market is too tight, which is what they always talk it as, and she thinks the labour market is too tight right now, that means what that actually means is she thinks unemployment is so low that people will be able to go, give me a pay rise or I'll walk and I'll go get a job somewhere else. And so the employer's going to go, oh, well, I got to give you a pay rise, even though it's 5% and inflation's only going to be 3%. Oh, God, wage price spiral. We're here. And so that's her thing. So she's talking about inflationary expectations, and it's no. What mostly drives inflationary expectations are petrol prices and just general inflation. And she's admitting that raising interest rates are not going to do anything for inflation. Well, then why would they affect inflation expectations?
Something I'd like to bring up, actually, the full wording of the RBA's mandate. I'd just like to read it. It's contribute to the stability of the currency, so inflation, full employment, comma, and the economic prosperity and welfare of the Australian people. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems completely against that part of the mandate.
And how they get around that is by saying if we don't have stable inflation, then you can't have the other two things.
Yeah.
So they link them directly with that. That's how they get around it. They say, oh, you can't be prosperous if inflation is above 3%. That's not possible. You can't have full employment if inflation is above 3%. So they elevate that inflation aspect to control everything else.
Yeah.
And, the really good point about the prosperity aspect, because she opened her press conference and in response to questions said, Australians are poorer. We are poorer. Why are they poorer? Because of the oil shock. And that's true.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to make you even poorer.
Yeah.
There was no Australians are poor, Australians doing it tough, so we don't need to smash you with another interest rate rise because it's already happened. No. Richard Dennis on the 7am podcast suggested her reasoning was essentially like, I got to cut off your leg because there's a chance
that it could get gangrenous, I think he said.
Gangrene in 6 months' time. Now, but Amy Rabikas was pointing out that really because poor people or people on low incomes, people who've got marginal attachment to the labour force, they're the ones who are actually going to get hit now. And what the Reserve Bank are worried about is those who are comfortable and are safe. And so it's actually a bit like I'm cutting off your leg because I'm worried someone else might get gangrened. The people who are going to be spending big and going for big wage rises are not the people who are getting hurt the most right now, not the young people who've got new mortgages, not the people who are renting and going to see their rents probably go up because we know that happened last time when interest rates went up. All of the, people who have marginal attachment to the labour force who are generally the first to lose their job. They are the people who are going to hurt.
Yeah.
They weren't the ones who were going to be asking for whopping big wage rises. So it's just this I didn't like the decision. I was against the decision.
Yeah.
But then the reasoning that she gave, I was like.
Yeah. Well, we talked about last time following the war, the invasion of Ukraine, and when the price of resources jumped then, similar to right now, and then we saw profit-driven inflation. And it's just, there's no concern for that.
I mean, no mention of that.
No.
None at all. It was all, wage price spirals coming.
I know that the
Batten
RBA.
down the hatches, pull the covers over your head. There could be a wage price spiral.
And I know that the RBA, it doesn't exactly have the power to prevent businesses from price gouging, but they were giving recommendations to the government to, not enact policies that might help people that might be inflationary. They're not telling the government to, maybe crack down on price gouging.
Exactly. She was asked because journalists really want to, especially from the Australian and the Fin Review, really want to be able to hit the government should next week's budget there be any spending measures that try and help people on lower middle incomes through this crisis. That makes the job harder. And listeners, I had a big rant on thepoint.com.au, which if you're in the mood to feel angry, go read.
Yeah. All right. Well, Greg, let's try to end on something of a more positive note. It does seem like, the budget's coming up next week. It seems like the government is going to make some more changes to address the inequality in our tax system and how wealth is taxed at a lower rate than income is in this country. Alongside rumours of changes to the capital gains tax discount in the budget next week, there's a rumour that the government will be making changes to the way trusts are taxed. Greg, for all the listeners who are not wealthy enough to know that much about trusts, and I'm included in that group, what exactly are they?
Yeah, trusts, and what we're really talking about here is a thing called family discretionary trusts. There are a whole different types of range of trusts. Often trusts will be set up in wills to basically divvy up family wealth and everything like that, where it's basically said you're getting this percent, you're getting that percent. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about these discretionary trusts where, let's say, someone makes a lot of money from investments, on the share market, buying and selling real estate and everything. So not wages. We're not talking wages here because wages are taxed when you get paid. So there's not much you can do to affect that. So we're talking investment income here. What they will do is set up a trust, a family trust, and everyone in the family, extended family, will be in that trust. You have to be kind of an adult. Kids, there's some tax arrangements. So if you're under 18, it's not that beneficial. But as soon as you hit 18, you can be in the family trust. So let's say I make $400,000 from all my investments in a year. Now that's going to be taxed. It's capital gains and everything. It's going to be taxed at, if it's just me, I have to pay the tax of $400,000. And because of our progressive tax system, that means, okay, I got the tax-free threshold to $18,000, but then I had the 16% tax rate, then the 30%, and then the 45%. But what I've worked out is we got, let's say, make it easy, we've got 4 people in my thing. I'll put all that money into the trust and we'll divvy it up so that you get 1,000, the other person gets 100,000.
Yep.
You get 100,000, my wife gets 100,000, I get 100,000. So then we're all paying taxes though we just made 100,000.
Yeah.
And what that means is all 4 of us get the $18,200 tax-free threshold. All 4 of us get the 16% tax rate up to 45,000. Then all 4 of us only pay a top tax rate of 30% rather than the 45% that we pay if it was 400. So that's what we mean by these discretionary trusts, because the trustee, the person who's in charge of the trust, can allocate the income in a discretionary way, which basically means in a way that ensures
to avoid paying as much tax as possible. Yeah. How many people how big of a thing are trusts in Australia?
They used to be fairly niche. Now there's around 1 million of them, and the amount of income though that's going through them is about Dave Richardson at the institute here calculated about 600 billion a year. 600
billion with a B,
which is just a little bit shy of a quarter of our GDP in terms of
my God.
how much it is.
Which there's only 1 million trusts. Well, only there's 1 million trusts. 600 billion.
Yeah, so there's a lot of money, and the tax office and Treasury have looked at these, and they know that roughly about 63 to 65% of all of the income is held by the richest 10% in these trusts. And it's because most of us get our money from wages.
Yeah.
The rich people don't. They get money from dividends, from investments, and they put them into trusts.
And they pay less tax.
Yeah, and they pay less tax. So what the government is thinking of doing, instead of treating everyone in the trust as though they are just like a normal taxpayer, saying, no, there's going to be a minimum tax rate of 30%.
Okay. Yeah.
And that kind of takes away a lot of the incentive. Doesn't get rid of all of it, but it certainly puts a big dent into it. So there will be some issues around how it'll be done. It seems, whenever we bring up trusts, farmers always get really angry because most farms are in trusts.
Yep.
And the reason they do that is because it makes it a lot easier to pass on from generation to generation. And you don't have the common example is, what if one of the sons gets divorced and the partner, basically wants half of, and it sort of splits up. Whereas if it's in the trust, it's kind of protected in that way. But that's quite easy. The ATO measures or actually asks, is your trust dependent on primary production or non-primary production, so just investments? So it's pretty easy to administer. So I wouldn't be surprised if they say, we don't want to have a fight with the farmers and all that, because that, as we've saw with so many other things, people who don't have farms will claim, this you can't do this, it's going to hurt the farmers, and that's politically tough. And so they might just carve them. And also they're a smaller part of the thing, of the 600 billion.
Do we know how much revenue these changes could raise?
How much it'll raise is tricky, but we know that we're talking a couple billion or so a year in terms of tax sort of avoided being paid due to these minimizations. So if they were taxed like normal people, they'd be raising an extra $2 billion or so, but possibly more than that. We had one financial firm claiming that high net worth individuals get around $145,000 a year in savings on average. And there's about
145,000 in savings.
And there's about 14,000 millionaires who earn $1 million a year. I think we can say they're high worth individuals. So if you're timesing 14,000 by 140,000, you're getting into the multiple billions pretty quickly. So so not nothing, and certainly something that deserves to be looked at, because again, it's this case of most people, there is no worth for these trusts. These trusts are really kind of just for wealthy people, for rich people. And
so why are they being taxed less?
Exactly. Why are they being taxed less? Why do they have advantage of this thing that really is, it's just a way to increase your wealth and avoid paying tax. So good move by Jim Chalmers if this happens.
Yes. Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Well, I am sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week, because that'll be post-budget, and we'll see. See what happens.
Budget week. I had no idea.
It's like Christmas for you.
No, it is anti-Christmas. It is not a fun week for me. It is a long day. So, but yes, next week we got the budget. We also got on the day after the budget, the latest wage growth figures out.
Oh yeah.
We've got lots
There'll
to do.
Be a lot to talk about.
You and I are both going to be doing a politics in the pub on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So huge week for everyone. Hope you tune in then. But thank you very much for listening this week, which was recorded on the 7th of May, and some things may have changed. If you'd like to see some great graphs about trusts and everything, have a gander at my column on the Guardian Australian site, and also on thepoint.com.au we've got some really good explainers on just what are trusts. You can also go there and read my rant about the RBA that got Elinor so fired up. And there's also, as always, heaps of content there. Our music, as always, is from Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you all next week for the budget.
See ya.